The sound was not loud, a sharp, sickening thwack that cut through the polished silence of the dining room in Greenwood, North Carolina. It was followed instantly by Sophia's gasp, and then the triumphant, sharp sound of clapping. I saw the red mark bloom instantly high on my daughter's cheek, and I saw the satisfied smirk on my son-in-law Liam's face. Across the table, Diana, Liam's mother, lowered her hands with the air of a critic applauding a successful stage performance. The dinner party, the supposed celebration of Liam's promotion, shattered like expensive crystal. My choice was immediate and brutal. Should I call 911 right now and risk dragging my daughter through a highly public legal nightmare? Or should I deploy every single ounce of my influence to make Liam disappear before he could ever hurt her again? I chose the second, deadlier option. I stood, not screaming, but rising with a terrifying professional stillness that froze the room. Liam, banking on the fact that I was recently retired and now softened, met my gaze. He didn't know the depth of the ice water in my veins. My greatest defect, the flaw that had propelled my career but nearly destroyed my first marriage, was my unprotective omnipotence. The unshakable, arrogant belief that there was no problem, moral or physical, that I could not fix or eliminate with sufficient application of resources and strategic leverage. This was not a moment for feeling. This was a logistical problem to be eradicated. Liam had secured his high-level transfer to the Asian division, meaning in exactly 72 hours. He and Sophia would be on a flight to Singapore, placing him permanently outside the reach of U.S. domestic violence statutes. The clock began ticking the moment Diana's clapping stopped. The silence in the room tasted of expensive scotch and the burnt edges of pride. I didn't spare Liam or Diana a single word. Confrontation, at this stage, was messy and inefficient. I stepped around the mahogany table, my gaze fixed on Sophia. Her breath hitched, anticipating the explosion, the righteous indignation. Instead, I simply reached out and placed 2 fingers, featherlight, beneath the bruised area of her cheek. She flinched, not from pain, but from the detached clinical nature of my assessment. "Go upstairs, honey," I instructed, my voice level. "Pack the essentials. You will be leaving this house before morning. Liam won't be joining you." My refusal to engage with the raw emotion, my commitment to strategy over fury, was the first manifestation of my flaw. Sophia's eyes pleaded for a father, but my mind was already several moves ahead, orchestrating the end of her marriage. A father's job, I always believed, was not to comfort the wounded, but to eliminate the weapon. Diana, however, felt compelled to justify her son's behavior, the act of clapping still resonating in the air. "David, please, it was an argument." Sophia was being utterly unreasonable about the move. Liam simply... I raised my hand, a gesture that used to silence boardrooms across the United States. The sheer audacity of her attempt to minimize the violence, attributing it to mere domestic friction, felt like a cheap insult to the serious legal and financial operation I was already constructing in my head. "Diana," I cut in, my voice low enough that Sophia, retreating, couldn't hear. "I know exactly who you are, and I know exactly who Liam is. The difference is, you're about to find out exactly who I was, before I decided retirement was a viable option." The scent of expensive cologne and fear started to mingle. I bypassed the front door, heading straight for the 3-car garage, the cold metal texture of my key fob reassuring in my palm. Sophia materialized in the doorway, her hands twisting the silk fabric of her dress. "Dad, stop," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't make a scene. We have 72 hours. We just need to get to Singapore and we can figure it out. Please don't use your influence. It's always so much worse when you get involved. It ruins everything." She was begging me to choose her emotional peace over my omnipotent control, a request my flaw rendered impossible. I looked at the bruise and my decision was affirmed. Her fear of my involvement was just another symptom of her learned helplessness, which I, the fixer, needed to correct. I pulled out onto the quiet, tree-lined street of Greenwood, the roar of the V8 engine a temporary shield against the domestic turmoil. I drove not to my own home, but to the empty office tower downtown, where my old security clearance still worked. 70 hours remained. I needed a clear, soundproof space to execute the first critical maneuver, the call to Martin Hale, my old general counsel. This wasn't about filing a police report. That would involve courts, juries, and the potential embarrassment of Sophia testifying. This was about severing Liam's entire professional life in the U.S. and ensuring Singapore would not accept him. I needed to move fast and invisibly, creating a legal and corporate vacuum beneath Liam's feet. The scent of stale, processed ozone hit me immediately as I entered the deserted executive floor. The air conditioning hummed the only song in the cavernous space. I bypassed the main reception desk, heading straight for the back server room, where the connection lines were secure and untraceable. A janitor, pushing a buffer that smelled heavily of industrial floor cleaner, looked up, startled by the late-night intrusion. "Sir, this area is restricted after midnight," he stated nervously, gripping the handle of the machine. It was remarkable how quickly people forgot who held the levers of true power in this city. I didn't stop walking. I handed him a single folded bill. $1,000. "This evening, this entire floor is restricted to everyone except me," I said, my voice low and authoritative. The janitor's eyes widened, the bill forgotten in his hand as he stared at the retreating back of a man who clearly operated outside the standard rules of the building. This dismissal of the guard's authority, my assumption that money and status could simply delete inconvenient regulations, was the small, toxic expression of my protective omnipotence. I was already sacrificing the integrity of my principles, proving Sophia right. When I got involved, I crushed everything in my path, even the small people trying to do their jobs. I sat at the massive cherry wood desk, the cold, smooth leather of the chair absorbing the heat of my presence. I keyed the number for Martin Hale using a secured line only used for international mergers. Martin answered on the first ring, his voice gritty with sleep. "David? What the hell time is it?" "It's time to earn your retainer, Martin," I stated, pulling up the digital file on Liam. "I need you to pull up every contractual agreement Liam has signed with Global Tech, focusing specifically on the morality clauses related to spousal conduct, harassment, and public image damage in the United States and abroad. I need the information within 4 hours. This is an internal emergency. We are not involving the police or litigation. We are engineering a corporate termination so comprehensive he will not be insurable for private sector work for the next 20 years. Martin was a professional. He absorbed the urgency instantly, the sound of papers shuffling audible over the phone. "A clean kill, David. You want him disemboweled by HR, not charged by the DA. I confirmed it. He paused. "But David, your daughter is his wife. This kind of action will burn everything down. You realize the collateral damage?" I realized the collateral damage, but the thought of Sophia's cheek already overruled all common sense and ethical limits. Step etapa 3, obstáculo. 1. Desafio prático. 25% da historia. The core practical challenge was establishing jurisdiction. Liam's company, Global Tech, was notoriously protective of its rising stars, and their internal compliance department moved with glacial speed. I had 68 hours remaining, and the most conservative estimate for internal review and execution of a morale-based termination was 7 to 10 days. I needed to force the timeline. Martin's initial findings, delivered precisely at 4:30 a.m. via encrypted email, confirmed that Liam was untouchable under standard corporate protocol unless the misconduct was reported to the police, the very route I was desperate to avoid. My focus shifted from the legal department to the public relations department. If I couldn't stop him legally, I would stop him socially and corporately. My plan required a perfectly constructed narrative of his violence, not for public consumption, but for the exclusive use of Global Tech's CEO, a man obsessed with the company's progressive image in the increasingly sensitive tech market of the United States. I drove back towards Greenwood as the eastern sky turned bruised purple. The air smelled sharp and cold, carrying the damp freshness of impending rain. I knew exactly where to get the proof. I needed Diana's testimony, or at least her confession. She had clapped, after all. She was complicit, and crucially, she was Liam's mother, the one person who could confirm his escalating pattern of behavior without involving Sophia. My strategy was simple: exploit a mother's loyalty to achieve a daughter's liberation. I found Diana gardening in her perfectly manicured front yard, a desperate attempt to create normalcy after the night's disruption. She wore expensive canvas gloves, the soil staining the pale linen of her jacket. She startled when I pulled the car to the curb. Her hands were trembling slightly as she gripped the trowel, the sharp metallic scent of the garden tool contrasting with the sweet perfume she wore. "David, this is unnecessary," she said, her voice tight, trying to regain the composure she had lost at dinner. "Liam is preparing for the move. He's stressed. We all are. He slapped my daughter, Diana," I stated, the words cutting through the suburban calm. "And you clapped." I didn't yell. I let the weight of the undeniable fact settle. "I'm giving you a choice. I can destroy Liam's life using corporate means that will financially ruin both of you, or you can record a short statement for me right now. a statement that will only be used internally by his company's HR, detailing the extent of his temper and the physical nature of the incident last night. And this was the practical challenge: convincing an arrogant, protective mother to betray her son solely based on my persuasive force and the threat of my protective omnipotence. Etapa 4, Subtramas e complexidades, sensorial focado no tom plus. CTAs invisibles. Diana's face crumpled, the perfectly sculpted expression finally giving way to genuine distress. She dropped the trowel. The dull thud was swallowed by the thick green lawn. "You're threatening me, David?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper, a strange high texture like brittle plastic. "I am offering you mercy," I corrected, pulling a small, high-fidelity recorder from my jacket pocket. The scent of ozone from the internal mechanisms was faint but noticeable. "Liam loses his job, the Singapore transfer, and his reputation. But you retain your financial security, provided you tell the truth. If you force my hand, I promise you, Diana, I will find every financial irregularity, every tax dodge, every secret you and your late husband ever engaged in, and I will share it with the IRS and the SEC in the United States before the end of the day." My tone carried the promise of total devastation. She stumbled backward, landing on the ornate garden bench. The choice was agonizingly clear: protect her child's immediate career move, or protect her own decades of comfortable, privileged existence. The quiet subtext of suburban wealth is always, how much are you willing to lose to maintain the facade? "He has a temper," she admitted, her shoulders slumping. "It's been getting worse since the promotion. He said Sophia drove him to it. He said she provoked him." This was her moral tightrope walk, admitting the violence while simultaneously mitigating the responsibility. "The statement must be clean, Diana. No excuses. Did Liam strike Sophia last night, and did you witness it?" I pressed record. "Yes, he hit her," she choked out, the admission tasting like ash in her mouth. She went on to detail the slap and her instinctive, shameful reaction of approval, the clapping. The recorded confession, though brief and forced, provided the essential internal validation I needed to bypass Global Tech's standard protocols. It was a clear, unambiguous statement of physical violence, confirmed by the perpetrator's own mother. I left Diana sobbing silently on the garden bench, her elaborate life collapsing around her. I didn't feel regret. I felt the familiar cold surge of success. With the evidence secured, I had reduced the remaining time to 60 hours. The next target was Global Tech's CEO. I needed to leverage my own reputation and the corporate confession to make the transfer to Singapore impossible before the plane left. My protective omnipotence demanded that this be over before Sophia realized I had sacrificed the family's peace for her safety. Etapa 5. Obstáculo 2. Dilema moral. 50% da história. E reversão. 1. I was already on the phone with Global Tech's CEO, Philip, a former rival whom I had once politically embarrassed in a major acquisition in the United States. I used that past leverage now, presenting him with Diana's coerced confession and the implied threat that if he didn't terminate Liam immediately for conduct detrimental to the company's public image, I would leak the story, complete with the mother's sick applause, to the Wall Street Journal. Philip capitulated, terrified of the PR fallout. Liam's employment was officially terminated, effective immediately. The transfer to Singapore was dead. Liam was grounded. I hung up, the victory a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. I had protected Sophia, but I had used blackmail and intimidation to do it. The cost was beginning to mount. I drove back to my own home, intending to finally tell Sophia that the threat was neutralized. Sophia was waiting for me in the living room, dressed in the clothes she had worn the night before, her posture rigid. The bruise on her cheek was darker, a permanent, awful reminder. Reversal. 1. I expected relief, gratitude, perhaps even tears. I received an absolute, silent fury. "You did it, didn't you?" she said, her voice shaking, not with pain, but with resentment. She didn't ask, she stated. "You ruined him. You used your old corporate contacts to destroy his entire career, just like you promised. I protected you, Sophia. He hit you." His mother clapped. He was leaving the country. There were 55 hours left. What choice did I have? I stopped him from ever touching you again. She took a step closer, and I could smell the faint, sharp chlorine scent of the tears she was holding back. "That wasn't your choice to make, Dad. That was mine to make." I knew he was volatile. I was planning to use the Singapore move as the escape, the slow exit. I was going to stabilize there, find a lawyer, and file from abroad, quietly. I knew if you got involved, you wouldn't just neutralize the threat. You would vaporize the battlefield. She gestured wildly, her hands trembling. This isn't about protecting me, Dad. This is about your need to control the narrative. You have eliminated Liam, but you have also eliminated my agency, my inheritance, and the life I built, fragile as it was. You've just proven to me that I can never fix my own life without your overreaching, toxic control. The dilemma was settled. I had saved her physically, but sacrificed her self-respect and my relationship with her to satisfy my protective omnipotence. Etapa 6. Consequências da reversão. O tempo está acabando. Reforçar prazo, plus, CTAs invisíveis. The air in the room thickened, making it hard to draw a clean breath. The cold, logical success of my strategy now felt like a hollow, poisoned victory. Sophia turned her back to me, the silk dress whispering against the leather sofa. She wouldn't look at the face that had saved her. Liam is still here, Dad, she stated, her voice dangerously flat. He's lost his job, his future, and the ability to leave the Sierra United States. He knows exactly who did it. You just turned a volatile man into a cornered, vengeful animal. You haven't protected me. You've made me a target in a more dangerous environment. The weight of her logic crashed down on me. My strategy, designed for maximum efficiency and minimum public exposure, had failed to account for Liam's reaction to total, humiliating ruin. My protective omnipotence had focused so intensely on the corporate threat that it had completely ignored the immediate physical danger. I looked at the dark mark on her face, and my hands, which had so confidently navigated international corporate law hours before, began to tremble uncontrollably. The true terror of control is realizing that eliminating one problem often spawns 5 new, unpredictable ones. The reality hit me with the force of Liam's slap. He was currently unemployed, furious, and still residing in the house only a few miles away. The clock had been reset. The immediate physical danger was higher now than it was 50 hours ago when he was preparing for a flight. Where is he now? I demanded, the tone of command returning, much to Sophia's visible irritation. He called. He's with Diana, he's packing his things. He said he'll be back tonight to retrieve his personal files and the antique clock. He said I need to prepare myself for what happens next. The sound of her forced calm was terrifying. I had effectively removed the legal threat, but invited a confrontation. I had about 112 hours, until Liam returned, fueled by vengeance and the knowledge that his father-in-law had destroyed his life. I needed to act again, but this time I couldn't rely on money or corporate leverage. This required personal physical protection, something I hadn't needed to provide since Sophia was a child. The cold texture of my car keys felt useless now. I needed something far more concrete. I needed the final physical severing. Etapa 7. Superação e crescimento, mas a falha ainda espreita, plus CTAs invisíveis. For the first time since the night began, I acknowledged the limits of my protective omnipotence. A lawyer or an HR executive could destroy a career, but neither could stop a man with nothing left to lose. I looked at Sophia, who was now staring blankly out the window, and realized I needed to abandon the corporate playbook entirely. I'm sorry, Sophia, I said, the phrase feeling rusty and unfamiliar on my tongue. I moved too fast. I didn't think about the fallout. But I will fix this, not by controlling Liam, but by ensuring he cannot reach you. She didn't react. The silence was the bitterest texture of all, confirming that my apology was meaningless compared to the damage I had inflicted. I picked up my phone again, but this time the call was simpler, more direct. I called Ray, a former security consultant who now ran a small, elite private protection firm, specializing in high-net-worth divorce cases across the United States. I cut through the pleasantries. Ray, I need full, non-traceable physical security detail at Sophia's house starting immediately. 2 men, armed, tonight. Liam is coming back to collect property, and he is extremely unstable. He is aware of my involvement, so he will be anticipating standard police response. I need the opposite. When money can't solve the problem, the only answer is superior force. Ray confirmed deployment within the hour. The financial cost was astronomical, but irrelevant. I drove back to Sophia's house, the setting sun painting the Greenwood neighborhood in ominous shades of orange. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, keeping watch. The smell of freshly cut grass was almost offensively peaceful. When I arrived, 2 large, silent men in dark, unmarked SUVs were already stationed discreetly near the entrance. Their presence provided a temporary, fragile shield. I found Sophia in the bedroom, staring at the packing boxes. She was meticulously organizing her separation, not the one I had orchestrated, but the one she had been planning. She was separating her property from his's. He's coming for the antique clock, Dad, the one his great-grandfather gave him. It's in the den. She still wouldn't meet my eye. I went to the den, and my hand rested on the heavy, brass surface of the mantel clock. The cold metal against my palm reminded me of the key fob from the night before. Useless leverage then, useless now. I realized this item was not just property, it was a psychological trigger. My omnipotence returned for a fleeting, dangerous moment. I could remove the clock, deny him this closure, and perhaps provoke a controlled, explosive reaction that the security detail could manage. But I checked myself. I had to stop controlling. Liam was coming to retrieve his property. I would let him. I would let the security team handle the physical threat, but I would not escalate the situation with another calculated, manipulative move. This was a fragile moment of true growth, a step away from my protective omnipotence, but the flaw still hovered, waiting for the perfect opportunity to reassert itself. 8 hours on remained until he was expected. Etapa 8. Obstáculo. 3. A crise máxima. 75%. Perda total causada pela falha. Pais CTAs invisíveis. Liam arrived precisely at 11:09 p.m., a full 3 hours before the flight was originally scheduled, a defiant gesture against the timeline I had shredded. He drove his company-leased sedan, now useless to him, directly up the driveway. He looked manic, his expensive suit rumpled, and the scent of cheap liquor preceded him. The two security men, massive shadows, stepped out from the darkness near the foyer, their presence a silent, undeniable threat. Liam stopped dead, his eyes narrowing. He recognized the play immediately. My heavy-handed security measure. A last, desperate attempt at total control. A private army, David? You really can't help yourself, can you? He sneered, his voice loud enough to carry across the lawn. I stood beside Sophia, positioned exactly where he would have to pass to enter the house. You are here only for the antique clock and your personal files, I stated, my voice echoing the authority I usually reserved for board meetings in New York. You will leave everything else. Do not speak to Sophia. Every action I took, even the necessary ones, only reinforced his feeling that I had stolen his entire life. He walked past the security men, his jaw tight. He entered the den, and I heard the sound of the desk drawers being violently yanked open as he retrieved his files. He emerged with the heavy clock clutched to his chest, the ticking a surprisingly loud, anxious rhythm. This was the moment of maximum crisis, triggered directly by my protective omnipotence. Because I had so brutally stripped away his corporate identity, leaving him with nothing but his rage, he sought to destroy the one thing I valued most, my sense of controlled order. He stopped directly in front of Sophia. Tell me one thing, Sophia. Did you know he was doing this? Sophia's hands clenched at her sides. She shook her head, a clear refusal to speak. Liam stared at the bruise on her face, and a cruel, knowing look flashed in his eyes. He raised the massive antique clock high over his head. I saw the glint of the brass, the heavy weight of the heirloom. I expected him to swing it at her. Instead, Liam pivoted and brought the heavy brass clock down with a shattering force against the massive antique porcelain vase on the hall table, the vase that had belonged to my mother, a relic of my family's history in the United States. The impact was deafening. Porcelain fragments sprayed across the highly polished floor, scattering with a brittle, delicate sound. Liam didn't look at me. He looked directly at Sophia, who gasped, covering her mouth. He hadn't harmed her physically this time, but he had obliterated something irreplaceable, something purely symbolic of my family's life, transforming his exit into an act of calculated personal destruction. That's what happens when you let the wrong people manage your assets, Sophia. He spat, then stormed out, throwing the files into his car and speeding away, the clock still clutched in his left hand. Etapa 9. A noite escura da alma. Mudança interna obrigatória. Plus CTAs invisíveis. The remnants of the vase lay scattered, sharp, white pieces glittering under the harsh hall light. The scent of dust and ancient porcelain filled the air. My throat tightened. The vase was the only thing I had rescued from my late mother's estate, a piece of fragile beauty that represented continuity and history. Liam hadn't just destroyed an object, he had destroyed a memory, precisely because he knew it was untouchable by corporate law or private security. I looked down at the wreckage, and then I looked at Sophia. She was weeping silently, her body shaking, not over the vase, but over the sheer, terrifying finality of the violence, both physical and emotional, that had erupted in her life. I saw the pieces of my mother's legacy on the floor, and I finally understood what Liam meant. I managed assets, but failed spectacularly at managing people. The cold realization struck me. My protective omnipotence had failed to protect the spirit of my daughter, and had instead amplified the danger, leading to an unnecessary, painful confrontation. I had approached a domestic crisis like a hostile takeover in the United States HUD financial market, using scorched earth tactics that left no one unharmed. I had won the battle. Liam's career was dead, but I had lost the war for Sophia's trust. I sank onto my knees, ignoring the security men standing stone-faced in the hallway. I didn't reach for my phone to call cleanup or my lawyer to press charges for property damage. I simply reached out and picked up the largest shard of porcelain, its edge sharp enough to cut me. The textured, cold surface pressed into my skin. I placed the shard gently on the hall table, then reached out my hand to Sophia, who was still frozen. This time, there was no command in my gesture, no strategy, no agenda. It was just an open hand, offered by a father who had exhausted all his power and found it utterly wanting. "Sophia," I whispered, my voice rough. "He's gone. You were right. I handled it terribly. I am sorry that I didn't trust you to find your own way out. I am sorry that my need to control ruined your plan and escalated the violence." I admitted the flaw, the core, internal shift required by the formula. I admitted that my best intentions, driven by arrogance, had caused harm. Sophia looked at my outstretched, shaking hand, and after a moment that felt like an eternity, she finally reached out, not to take my hand, but to gently touch the bruise on her own cheek. 4 hours, remaining until the original flight time. The danger was past, but the damage was profound. Etapa 10. Climax. No límite exacto de prazo. Plus, CTAs de suspense narrativo. Sophia finally met my gaze. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but the self-pity was gone, replaced by a weary resolve. She didn't embrace me, but she didn't pull away either. She simply sat down on the bottom step of the staircase, her breath rattling slightly. "I need a real lawyer now, Dad. Not Martin Hale, the corporate executioner. I need someone who can handle the divorce in our United States or civil courts, quietly and without media attention." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small folded business card. I had this since 3 months ago, when Liam first threw a plate at the wall. She had been preparing her independent escape for months, while I had arrogantly assumed I was the only solution. I took the card. The smooth, heavy stock felt unfamiliar. It was for a small local family law attorney specializing in complex domestic matters. My protective omnipotence had blinded me to the fact that Sophia was already working on her own liberation, rendering my rescue nothing more than an explosion of unnecessary collateral damage. We spent the next few hours in silence. The sound of the security men exchanging hushed radio checks, the only noise competing with the heavy ticking of the old grandfather clock in the next room. Sophia began carefully sweeping the porcelain shards into a dustpan. I helped her, our movements clumsy, wordless. At 3:00 a.m., the exact hour the plane to Singapore was scheduled to depart, Liam called. His number flashed on Sophia's phone, and she immediately put it on speaker, placing the phone on the debris-littered hall table. Liam's voice was ragged, stripped of its arrogance, sounding panicked and desolate. "Sophia, I'm at the airport. They won't let me board. They said my visa was revoked. They said my job was terminated hours ago. You didn't leave a note. Did your father do this?" Sophia picked up the phone, her hands steady. This was the moment of emotional climax, the severing. "Yes, Liam, he did. You hit me, and your mother clapped. The flight you were so looking forward to is gone, and the job is gone. The difference is, my father can make another call and ruin the last remnants of your life. I'm filing for divorce this morning. Do not contact me again." She hung up, her face pale, but her shoulders were straight. The ticking clock in the hall seemed to slow momentarily. The threat was truly neutralized, not just corporately, but personally. Etapa 11. Reversão 2 e resolução. Revelação final imprevisível. The tension evaporated, leaving behind a profound emptiness. Sophia put the phone down, then walked into the kitchen, the floor cold beneath her bare feet. I followed, watching her methodically prepare a cup of strong, black coffee. The raw scent of the brew was a relief after the night's metallic and chemical smells. "The clock is gone, the vase is shattered, Liam is ruined, and I'm safe," she summarized, placing 2 steaming mugs on the counter. "It's done." "It is," I confirmed, taking a sip. The bitter heat was exactly what I needed. Reversal 2. The ultimate flaw revelation. But it's not just Liam who is ruined, Sophia said, her eyes fixed on the distant outline of the suburban neighborhood of Greenwood. Diana called me yesterday, Dad, right after you left her in the garden. She wasn't calling to apologize for the clapping. She was calling to tell me something you missed. My stomach dropped. I had dismissed Diana as merely an accomplice, focusing only on the confession I could extract. My omnipotence had blinded me to the fact that someone else might have been working on a deeper, more secret agenda. She told me that the entire Singapore transfer, the promotion, and the celebratory dinner, it wasn't Liam's idea at all. It was hers, Sophia revealed, her voice thin. Liam didn't want the move. He was terrified of failure in the Asian market. Diana knew he was spiraling, losing control in the United States. She orchestrated the promotion and the transfer as a desperate, final attempt to separate him from me, the perceived source of his anxiety, and force him into a controlled, high-pressure environment where she hoped he would straighten out. The woman who clapped was not celebrating violence. She was celebrating a strategy of forced separation that she believed was her only way to save her son. The slap was bad, Dad, unforgivable. But Diana was not complicit in the abuse. She was complicit in the cover-up of her desperate plan. She clapped because she saw the slap as the final, necessary explosion that would validate her decision to push him out of the country. Sophia turned to me, the bruise on her face standing out sharply. Your call didn't just ruin Liam's career, Dad. Your call ruined Diana's last-ditch attempt at saving her son's sanity, and she knows it was your overreach that trapped him here, unstable and vengeful. I had thought I was fighting a monster and his callous mother. Instead, I had simply intercepted one complex, misguided act of protective love with another, more destructive one. My protective omnipotence had failed to see the entire chessboard, focusing only on the piece I wanted to capture. Presa etapa 12. Conclusão com custo. Vitória plus. Perda permanente. Balanço agridoce. Plus. CTA final emocional. Dawn was breaking over Greenwood, the first pale light spilling through the kitchen window. The smell of strong coffee and cold ashes permeated the house. The victory. Liam was permanently out of Sophia's life. He was professionally disgraced, grounded in the United States, and now subject to the constraints of a divorce proceeding she would manage herself, with her own chosen counsel. Sophia was safe, physically and strategically. The loss. Costo da Vitória. The separation was final, but the scar ran deeper than the bruise on Sophia's cheek. The vase was not the only thing broken. I placed my mug down, the ceramic making a soft clink on the counter. I'm sorry, Sophia. Truly. I failed to see that not everything can be solved by maximizing leverage. Sophia looked at the business card of her new lawyer, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. The difference between you and me, Dad, is that I chose to survive, and you chose to win. I am grateful you protected me from Liam, but you didn't save me from the wreckage of your own power. She nodded toward the hall, where the security men were already discreetly packing up their gear, having ensured the physical threat was neutralized. I need you to go now, Dad. I need to handle the next steps alone, without your influence. I nodded, the final command of the night delivered by my daughter, ordering me to step back. I had achieved the objective. Liam was gone and rendered powerless. But I had lost the absolute control I craved, and in doing so, I had permanently fractured my relationship with Sophia. The time I had spent trying to fix the situation in 72 hours now felt like a lifetime wasted on the wrong strategy. The arrogance of my protective omnipotence had been shattered, leaving behind a profound and permanent emptiness that no amount of money or power could ever fill. I stood up, walked into the hallway, and gently placed the large shard of my mother's vase into Sophia's hand, a physical representation of the damage I had caused. Then I turned and walked out of her house, not as the all-powerful executive who could eliminate any threat with a single call, but as a flawed, defeated father. The divorce would proceed quietly, managed by Sophia, allowing her the agency I had tried to steal. I had bought her safety with the highest currency, her trust in me,